Welcome to the Growing Up Bananas podcast, where we dissect the perks and tribulations of being bananas.
It's hard being yellow.
When we feel so white.
My name is Ethan. I've got two Asian blokes sitting across from me today, and in many ways, I'm sitting across from them. How are we going today, guys?
Yeah, pretty good after all that setting up. Thank you for having us.
So yeah, a
Ethan.
few technical issues, but yeah. Look, very fortunate today to be joined by great friends of the show, Two Asian Blokes podcast. I was lucky enough to do an episode with them as well, so I've called in the favour today, and the boys are in the hot seat today.
This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Be sure to check out Podcast of the Month, Barrel Age Flicks, and Hilf podcast. Links in the description.
I guess to start off with, guys, tell us a little bit about your podcast and we can take it from there.
All right. So yeah, we are Two Asian Blokes podcast. My name is Dan with H, and that's Thavy over there. Yeah, we talk about Asian pop culture, so films, TV shows, comic books, anime, music, food, a lot of different things. We basically do movie reviews, but from the lens of like Asian Australians that are interested in Asian cinema and that kind of stuff. But we also do kind of like Western stuff from time to time as well. We did episode on John Wick, and so like our our standards of covering things is basically anything that we like and we want to talk about at the time. Ethan joined us for Dragon Ball Z, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, we really liked talking about that show with you.
Yeah, that was actually a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to hearing all that. So Dan, do you consider yourself a banana?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like Tavia and I were talking about this before. Like obviously we were born in Australia, we grew up in Australia. But you know, our parents are from Laos and immigrated to Australia in the 70s. So back when they were young. So it's kind of weird. I feel like maybe not so much a banana, but kind of like a mix of different things. Because like our podcast is about Asian pop culture, right? So we're obviously into a lot of Asian stuff, the media and stuff like that. But in terms of our schooling, you know, we grew up around like predominantly white Australians. But I've always kind of felt like my identity was more like the Asian guy in amongst all the white people, I guess, as opposed to like somebody that was white on the inside but Asian on the outside, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think we're all of us Asian Australians have that similar sort of sentiment, especially ones that were born here or if you came here early. Tavi, you might have just missed that one, but do you consider yourself a banana?
Yeah, San was saying it's a pretty tricky one. I never really felt like I was a banana, but I did go to a predominantly like white high school. And yeah, I always felt like I was just the Asian kid. But like my interests were both like a mixture of like white and Asian interests, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're into like heavy metal music.
Yeah, I was into metal, yeah, which is not really
Yeah, which we're going to touch on later.
yeah.
There's a lot of different things you can kind of look back on and be like, all right, well, that probably wasn't stereotypically white or stereotypically Asian. So it's good to kind of look back and play a bit of go down memory lane a little bit.
I feel like the most Asian part of me was like my school lunches. I think when like when I was in primary school, like a lot of my friends would rock up with like fruit roll-ups and like ham and cheese sandwiches and stuff.
Oh
Yeah, yeah. And I'd come in with like a fucking banh mi and just and just
Yeah,
be
I didn't have a
like
bun me. There was nowhere to get a bun me where I went to school. Yeah.
and an apple. A banh mi and an apple would be my lunch.
Man, I wish I had
Which I didn't
Yeah.
appreciate at the time, to be honest. I was a little bit embarrassed, like rocking up with that kind of lunch, back in the day. But nowadays, yeah, like a good banh mi.
Oh, the kids would kill for that now.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, my lunches were pretty white. Yeah. Just like I didn't like a lot of the I mean, obviously I grew up eating Asian food and Lao food, but I'd always get my parents to pack me like white lunches because they smelt less. Like I had a thing where like if something was quite pungent and cold, it's just like nah, I just wouldn't eat it. So I just had like pretty low nutrient hundreds and thousands sandwiches with butter, if you remember them. Yeah, not the healthiest, but
Fairy bread sandwich. It's what we call it in Australia.
So then take us through your childhood. So, like you said, Dan, your family's from Laos. I know Thavy, you guys are kind of friends from back in the day. What was it like growing up? Were you guys pretty strict? Would you say the parenting was, stereotypical, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, I think probably Tavi and I had pretty similar upbringings because our parents were actually like school friends. So they basically immigrated to Australia together, like as a collective almost. So I've known Tavi for like since he was born, basically. Um,
too long.
yeah, I think like from what I've learned from like talking to other Asian people as an adult, I think my parents were not as strict as some others. Like they I think even compared to Tavi's parents, my parents were pretty chill for the most part. Like they kind of trusted me and my brother to yeah, do the right thing, which is honestly not always the best idea is to trust your kids to do the right thing. But for better or worse, they did. And yeah, because of that, I feel like I was quite lucky in that I was able to I had a lot of freedom to do what I felt was right and kind of make my own mistakes as well. This probably comes a bit later down the line, like towards high school and university and stuff. But yeah, even as a young child, I didn't feel like they were very strict, and I felt like in general I was a pretty good kid back then as well. Like I didn't really need to be told to get my homework done, and I felt like just that the mentality of studying hard just came as an instinct rather than through like strict parenting. But how about you, Tavi?
Yeah, my parents, my dad especially was pretty strict. But my mum was a bit more looser. I think she kind of didn't mind what I was doing, but my my dad was also like he would try to introduce me into like more like Western stuff because my parents would like try to introduce me to different cultures. Like they'd cook spaghetti or they would make lasagna or like other Western dishes. But when it came up to like studying, it was quite typical. Like you should be. It's gonna sound really cliche, but yeah, you should be a doctor or a lawyer. Those are the jobs. I think I was being pushed more towards, I guess, like engineering because on the off chance I really liked watching Wallace and Gromit as a kid, and he was an inventor and an engineer. And then it's like, oh, I guess Tavi wants to be an engineer. Until I realized, oh, engineering is pretty boring. And then but I like kind of was following that path aimlessly. I didn't get a chance to say before, but like, because I'm an indie filmmaker now, which took kind of many years of trying to convince my parents to let me go down this path because it's pretty unconventional. Um, whether Dan just mentioned like the looser parenting maybe led him to being like more studious, where in high school I lost my way in about year 9 or year 10, and I realized, what am I doing with my life? And then I just played video games and watched movies all day. So that's probably like maybe the strictness maybe pushed me to the other side of the spectrum, perhaps. But yeah, it's. But they eventually like loosened up later when they gave up on me, maybe. So it's all right.
Well, after doing this for 20 something episodes now, and so we get a lot of perspective. It's interesting to contrast. So you definitely have probably three sort of pools. So one is in Dan's situation where the parents kind of feel that he's probably on the right path, let him be, he doesn't need to be pushed. Then the other one is where the parents are just too busy trying to make lives for themselves as being first or second generation immigrants. And they just don't have the time to really be that sort of hands-on parent. And then obviously then there's one with Tavi's situation where you just get pushed so hard and you really, I don't know what you say, despise, but you get kind of pushed away from doing what you're told. You sort of go against the authority or what you're being told. So yeah, it's really interesting to see the different ways, and then obviously the outcomes of what people end up doing with that at the end of it. So very important how we were raised and how it all kind of turned out. And then I guess for both of you guys then, so obviously a thing that I've noticed is for especially first generation immigrants, families, all you have is your family. So being family orientated is quite important because obviously you left a lot of family back there. Some were managed to make the trip over. Was that whole family like blanket quite important for either of you when you guys were growing up?
Yeah, I would say so. I think especially for our parents, like I feel like yeah, like you said, they did pretty much come by themselves. My mum and dad came together, but yeah, when they first arrived, they only had each other. Luckily though, they met really nice people. Like they were taken in by like I guess these like homestay parents, I would say, I would call them. But yeah, they're like white Australian people, and they took my parents in, and they just treated them so well. And like to this day, we still call them uncle and auntie. Like that's how kind of close they are to us. And I think um, like not so much blood family, but like Tavi's parents, for example, coming over and eventually meeting up with my parents again in Australia, like we kind of formed our own community and we became close knit as if we were like blood relatives. And then, like when they had kids, which is Tavy and our generation, like we were basically brothers and like raised as such. So yeah, in a sense, the family aspect is very important, but it wasn't really like blood ties. It was more like this kind of community that bonded together through shared experience and through shared history.
Before you give your part, Tavi, I just wanted to say, so I mean, especially for people who are born here or Westerners, you see in Australia, there's Chinatown and, Vietnamese town and all these sort of segregated areas. And every time, like, friends and people will comment and be like, why don't they just assimilate? Why don't they just go out and, be more Australian? But you realize, especially like what you said, Dan, your parents came with not knowing anyone, probably with nothing. So you just want to kind of hang on to a little bit of the past in any way you can. So I definitely understand why there's sort of communities still try to keep something from back where they're from. For you then, Tavi, for the sort of extended family, did you guys have any here, or how did it work out for you?
We well, I've got a pretty spread out family network. I have cousins that live in the States. I have cousins that live in France. Because when our parents moved here, it was either you went to the States, you went to Australia, or you went to France. So I'm quite surprised when I hear, oh, such and such like is doing this and that, and like I didn't even know I had a cousin there, all that kind of thing. So it's funny how most of my blood relatives, I guess, are kind of out of Australia, and I don't have many blood relatives living in Australia, but as Dan said, most of the, I guess, family relationships are dealing with like our parents who moved here on scholarship or people they knew from Laos and they moved here together. So we formed like that community. And as Dan said, like their children, which is us, uh, we kind of stuck together, became friends. And even I think I was really mostly comfortable with myself was after high school, and this is no shade on my high school friends. Like I love those guys, but I was kind of really comfortable with myself when I was hanging out with you guys, Dan, and everyone else in the Lao community. We'd go to net cafes together, that kind of thing. So I think that's when I really found my friends and my kind of family bonds with like the people. It's funny because I've listened to a few of your episodes, and it's kind of like even though I went to a predominantly white school, somehow Asians just come back together. It's just like, and I don't really know why. It's just a bit different when you speak with your Caucasian friends and your Asian friends, and it's just like it's just a strange phenomenon. I think I'm not sure because like yeah, I just felt more comfortable around Asians when I was in my early 20s. Yeah.
I don't know if it's Asians though, because I will probably touch on this a bit later as well. But Tavi and I eventually moved to Japan and lived there for a while. But it's weird that in Japan, the people that we were gravitating more towards were
Yeah,
like
we're Caucasian
were
people.
yeah,
Yeah, and
like
not Japanese
Australians and Brits,
people.
and not
Yeah.
Japanese people
So that's why,
necessarily.
yeah, you're right. It's strange.
So
I
it
don't really know.
might not
Yeah.
be like an Asian thing. It might just be like a, I don't know, just
Outsider.
yeah,
Outsider syndrome.
potentially, yeah, potentially. Or maybe we're just searching for people that have shared experiences and shared backgrounds.
I think
Yeah.
that's what it is. And every time, every sort of episode, I ask the people of, okay, if they've had a struggle during school or they didn't quite fit in, it could just be puberty and someone being a bit different. But usually, how did that individual cope with it? And it's either through music, sport, shows, things like that. That common interest, and more often than not, it's shared with other Asians. But a lot of times it's not. It's usually just a hobby or something that everyone has in common. So that's you're probably right there, Dan. Before I kind of move on to the next sort of topic, I don't know much about the Laos political landscape. I'm going to be honest. I think I said on your episode you're the only guys who actually know that of Laos descent.
Hmm.
Why did a lot of the community or why did a lot of the people emigrate? Was it a political or just like most third world Asian countries trying to get a better life?
I think mostly a better life and escaping the war because it was 1975. And I heard a lot of stories from my dad about, escaping the war when the Americans were bombing Laos. And uh, I think I'm not sure Dan mentioned in our previous episode or not, but like uh, most of my blood family is in Thailand, but they were actually originally from Laos, and they had to flee there because of the bombings. So moving to Australia was not really a political move in a sense. It's more just like it's literally a better life, because unfortunately Laos is still a third world country just because of those conflicts. I was there like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and it's like you can really see like poverty, and it's quite sad to see, honestly. And like you can't develop because of all the
Like they're
bombings that
still
have happened.
finding
Yeah,
unexploded bombs
yeah,
like around
yeah.
Laos, right? So it's
It's like yeah, and I went to some of the war museums there, and it's like it's pretty heavy because it's like you can't develop just because of like the history. So it's mostly yeah, like there's not too much unless you're like super rich. There's not too much of a life to be had in Laos, unfortunately. Yeah.
it's getting better over time. Like I think, I
Yeah.
mean, I haven't been there since the year 2000,
It
but
is getting better, but it's slowly, I would say. Yeah.
And is there any stereotypical traits that you can identify for like a Laos family? So like, so we were joking the other time. It's, you know, Asian or Chinese. You've got the cat, the moving arm, and, you know, the money man, and all those sorts of things. Is there anything you guys can think of that would make a typical Laos or household or something?
I can't think of an object, but I can think of a mentality which we call Lao time. So let's say you organize a party. I mean, okay, let's record our podcast at 6 p.m. We'll record at 7. That's Lao time. So we're kind of always late to things.
Yeah.
We're
You've experienced Lao
yeah.
time firsthand, Ethan, with this recording.
So that's a very common loud trait. It's not that we're very laid back, maybe too laid back. So we're always just like, let's just do it like this. Let's just just get there like 30 minutes late. It's cool, and it's like
We also have a lot of stuff that is more synonymous with Thailand and Thai culture now. We're kind of like the New Zealand of that area, you know? It's like, like New Zealand invented lamingtons, but they're an Australian food now, right? Russell Crowe was born in New Zealand, but he's Australian, right? So
It's basically Australian. Yeah.
it's kind of like Lao, like, for example, we have a version of kickboxing called Muay Lao.
do we?
Yeah, but Muay Thai is far more famous, right? But it's quite similar. And we were talking about this today. Lap, you know, the minced meat salad. That's a Lao food. It's not a Thai food.
Are you familiar with that dish, Ethan? La?
No, not at all.
So if you go to a Thai restaurant and you see a dish called lap on the menu, it's very tasty. It's like a meat salad kind of deal. Just know that that's Lao and that's not Thai.
I have a pet peeve about that, but that's all right.
Yeah. But in terms of like iconography, I don't think there's anything as iconic as like a the cat statue. Or
Yeah,
anything
just
like that.
maybe like Buddhas, but that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good to just clear that one up. From my side, then I wanted to kind of skip over most of the childhood, which I don't know if this is going to be a good move or not, but I want to talk to you more about the impact of media on us as young Asian men, the lack thereof, maybe even, but media in general. So, talking to some other guests, when I went through school, liking things like Dragon Ball Z or anime or games, games was probably the biggest one.
Mm.
It wasn't considered something that was cool. So myself, who played a lot of sport, I would kind of keep it on the down low that I like these sort of things. Whereas now, talking to some of the younger guests in the early 20s, it's fine. Like, it's totally acceptable to be really into gaming and anime and things like that. When do you guys think that kind of shifted?
Probably in the last um 10, 12 years. I think when Marvel started becoming popular, I think that's when it started to shift. Maybe the late 2000s. Um, yeah, and also the late 2000s, early 2010s is when the new K-pop wave was becoming really popular. I really noticed it then. Yeah, that's when we started going to net cafes and stuff. Then and we were playing Counter Strike. Because you're absolutely right, Ethan. Like, if you like, I know kids who are beaten up in my high school if you were liked anime or games. But then I think late 2000s, early 2010s was when there was like a big LAN movement. And then, people were playing CS, and then you go mingle with the Chinese players who are always just swearing in Chinese and getting really angry at Dota. So, and then I think there's this kind of community that kind of like that stuff. And I think we might have touched on like sharing anime DVDs as well, Dan. Like, I think it was the because it was quite underground. Yeah, you sharing like Full Metal Alchemist and stuff, and like you got your trench coat to like not show the authorities.
This
like,
is
"Oh, I got
this is
some
before
anime."
Crunchyroll,
Yeah,
before
before
streaming
Crunchyroll.
services. So it was like a matter of downloading episodes of anime and just burning them onto a DVD disc to share. And yeah, like, there's some good memories. Like, I remember just getting like 4 discs of Naruto episodes, 25 episodes each disc, just spamming like the first 100 episodes of Naruto. Yeah, I think I don't know even then though if it was something that I really talked about that much with like my high school friends. I know like we shared anime, but I don't like LAN and gaming. I probably talked about a bit more than anime, maybe.
Because Dan and I went to pretty different high schools. Because Dan went to a predominantly Asian high school, so a lot of Asians at Dan's high school. So I thought that stuff was more widely accepted than my school, which was like 98% white. So I was like, uh, that's why I wanted to hang out with you guys more because I can talk about like games and anime. Yeah, but like, when do you think the shift was, Ethan? Like, when did you notice this?
Well, I'm just thinking about it now. It's probably one, obviously, the rise of the internet, so things are more readily available. People started making money streaming, things like that. Obviously, the aesthetic is way more popular just in things. And obviously, social media as well is probably another one. Again, because, people are seeing that, these gamers are making money, people are streaming, making money. Suddenly, it's like, well, they're actually useful rather than the old sort of stereotype was it was just some guy just masturbating in his bed room. That was like the person who watched these sort of shows and things like that.
That or school shooter, yeah. That was like the way media portrayed us back then. Just like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, even with like K-pop. Tavi and I went to a Twice concert yesterday, and
Which is totally not the reason I came to Sydney.
and we really noticed the difference in the crowd that was there last night compared to the crowd that attended the K-pop concert. When was that?
Yeah,
2011?
I went to a K-pop concert in 2011, and there's definitely a shift. Um, we were talking about it earlier, where like this generation, in the best way, I would say like a bit more like kind of like geeky or nerdy because that culture is a bit more acceptable, whereas like back in 2011, it was kind of like cultists or meatheads, maybe like really kind of strange people. So it's I don't know, like people who kind of like they kind of were happy to express themselves or really wanted to express themselves a lot more because of how I guess underground K-pop was back then. Whereas now it's really normal to just like K-pop. Um, as like some of your younger guests might have said, it's like K-pop and games and anime. It's just like you don't think twice about that kind of thing. It's just part of the zeitgeist now, and I think that's cool. So it's good. Yeah.
And then, like you guys said, you guys spent a bit of time in Japan, which we'll definitely get to. But just the top of my head, I'm thinking, like the J-rock, J-pop phase where like the visual K, and that was a bit kind of next level, a bit extreme for your conservative Western sides. Whereas now K-pop and K-dramas, it's a bit less out there, I think we can probably say.
I don't know if Visual K will ever be that popular in the West though. It's maybe a bit too extreme.
Visual
But
K is
maybe,
probably not that popular. Yeah.
maybe it'll get there eventually. We'll see.
Because you guys talk about this a lot on your podcasts, the whole K-pop movement. I mean, I'd say the majority of people can't understand what is being sung about. Yet it's so popular. Why is it? Obviously, the girls are hot and the guys are appealing
The guys are
to
hot.
some certain crowds. But can you guys think of anything else that has spurred that whole movement?
That's a really good question.
Because the music is good. Whether I can understand it or not, I'll still have a listen, Whereas I probably, if it was a German song, just for example, and I pick on the Germans, probably wouldn't listen to it, even if it was good.
I like Rammstein though, so that's one German thing I listen to.
I think there's something very palatable about the aesthetic of K-pop and Korean culture in general. Like it's just very easy to digest. maybe more so than something like Ramstein.
Yeah,
Right?
Rammstein is.
It's got more mainstream commercial appeal, probably. Like, I mean, cosmetically, obviously, like everybody in K-pop is not difficult to look at. Yeah, even the music I think is quite easy to digest. Even if you're not really into like a poppy sound, like it kind of just washes over you at a point. And like the more you listen to it, the more you kind of like grow to just accept it and maybe not like it initially, but it does kind of earworm its way
Yeah.
into your
It's funny, because you and I, Ethan, we've mentioned that we've come from a metal loving background, and in the late 2000s, I hated K-pop. I'm like, what is this commercial garbage? Like, because I remember you guys would show me some K-pop and C-pop, and this is maybe more my Western banana side coming out. I was just like, what is this? Like, who wants to sing about feelings and loving boys? Like, who would listen to this? Yeah, you. I'm like, get rid of this. Get this out of here. But Dan is absolutely right. It does earworm its way into you, especially like at the net cafes when Girls' Generation came out. Um, we have a particular friend. I won't name him on this podcast, but he kind of bombarded me with Girls' Generation. He's, yo, Thavy, man, check this out, man. Like, this is the best shit. Like, dude, I don't really like this that much. And then, like, over the months, I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. And then I ended up, like, moving from one end of the spectrum to, like, I mean, I'm going to Sydney to K-pop concerts twice in my life, you know? So I swayed the other way completely. And it's like, so I can understand sometimes it's not musically the best, but it's also like maybe it is that primitive size. Oh yeah, girls look good, so I'm just gonna go. But it's also like I think there's a sense of like Asian pride about it as well, because there's not in history there hasn't really been anything Asian that has really hit the mainstream, unless we're talking about like kung fu cinema or Jackie Chan
Yeah,
or Bruce Lee.
there have been
Yeah,
waves, right? Like there was the J horror boom of the early 2000s as well, right? So it does come in waves, and but K-pop has been like around for a long time, and it's kind of been consistently growing, and it doesn't seem like there's any sign of it dying down at the moment. So, um, yeah, it is kind of this. It's almost like the MCU of Korea, right? It's
yeah,
kind of this thing
yeah.
that's just appeared out of nowhere and just really just blown up over the last decade. So yeah, you're probably right.
And that's probably I think, yeah, there's definitely a lot of different factors there, which I think we've touched on quite a few good ones, which when you actually sit down and think about it, yeah, there's definitely a few reasons why they're having success.
Do you like K-pop, Ethan?
I'm going to be honest, I'm not a massive
Give it a
fan.
chance,
It's
man.
not that I
Give
don't
it a
like
chance.
it.
Maybe
Yeah,
it's
you
just
never know. Look what happened to
spam
me.
it.
The main thing is, if I don't understand it, I'm way more inclined to listen to music that I can understand. So I'm a drummer. I like to think that I'm somewhat of a poor man's musician, but so I listen to all types of music for the music. And then if I'm listening to lyrics, I want to be able to understand it. So that's probably the main reason why I kind of don't engross myself too much. But I mean, being married to an Asian woman, I hear it all the time, and it's just by osmosis. I know who's who.
Okay, yeah,
You can't escape it.
fair.
I was going to say then, so for us growing up as younger Asian men, in terms of the representation, and I don't want to get too deep on it because it's probably been covered so many times, but like who did we have to look up to? And then I guess that's why the likes of the Dragon Ball Zs we spoke about on your podcast, why younger guys would like that. Cheese TV in Australia, a big reason why it had so much success, but more so we didn't really have those kind of role models or guys to look to. Plenty of women actors kind of play the same roles, but yeah, for us, they were either kung fu masters or they were slimy gangsters.
Yeah, 100%. Like for the longest time, I think for me, like the only kind of Asian face I was seeing on TV was Jackie Chan, pretty much.
Jackie Chan,
And
Bruce Lee, yeah.
yeah, and that I love Jackie Chan movies to this day, and I think that's probably why. Like we were just exposed to that kind of movie for a long time. But I mean, at the same time, like we mentioned, the J horror boom of the 2000s, and again, it's kind of like when you see something that's Asian become popular, you do get like a bit of pride in that. Even though we're not Japanese, we're like, oh yeah, Western audiences really like this stuff, and this is what our part of the world has to offer. So maybe like cast us as more than a slimy gangster or
Yeah.
a kung fu master, as you put it, Ethan.
I think yeah, we didn't have too many that were kind of like advertised to us. But I think when I look back, I think they were always there. You just kind of had to look for it. I think for me, obviously, like I grew up watching a lot of Hollywood movies, and I don't know why, but I had a special affinity with my dad watching Tom Hanks movies. So like he was like kind of iconic for us. But I think there was a point where it's like, it was anime or like, we'd probably look up to a lot of anime characters like Ryu or Ken, even though Ken's American, but like you get the idea, or Jin from Tekken, or Cloud from Final Fantasy, but there wasn't any live action people. So it was only for me in my mid teens where I think I've talked about this on my podcast, so I won't go into too much, but it was me just going to JB and going to the Eastern Eye section, and there was just all these action DVDs. I'm like, who are all these people? And then I started watching a lot of cinema from Japan and Korea and Thailand. And then for us growing up, then we'd look up to Tony Jaa when we watch Ong Bak for the first time. Or like my man here, Lee Byung Hun, who's crying in pain on my T-shirt from A Bittersweet Life from Korean cinema. So I think for me, I actually did have a few Asian actors to look up to in my teens at the very least. So I finally kind of discovered them on my own, um, which is one of the big reasons I wanted to do like our podcast, Two Asian Blokes, was to kind of bring awareness to these hidden gems that there is a lot of like Asian influence and a lot of really respectable Asian people to look up to, even though we might not have had them as young men. It's not too late to kind of look up to them now, I think. Yeah.
And you can see the landscape changing as well in Hollywood, especially like over the last couple of years. Like you have like Everything Everywhere All at Once just blowing up, which has led to like a resurgence in Ki Hee Kwan's career, and more appreciation for Michelle Yeoh as well. And of course, Crazy Rich Asians back in the day as well. That was kind of like started it all, really. And yeah, I know you have opinions about that movie, Tubby. It's not for you really, that movie specifically, but you can't deny that it did open the door for a lot of Asian actors
Yes, I know,
going
dude.
into Hollywood, right?
Yeah, I can't
Well,
deny
you
that.
just look at the cast; they're all over in different shows and movies now. A couple of years removed, so it's definitely There's no doubt that they've had a pretty decent run from there.
But I guess like for us, like we see so much talent in like the movies that Tavi was talking about in like Korean cinema and in Japanese cinema and other parts of the world. So which is still not quite recognized to the same level as like a Hollywood production, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like even though movies like Parasite and Drive My Car and Decision to Leave and yeah, that stuff is there and people do recognize it, but it's still kind of niche. It's still kind of like for film snobs a bit. So it would be really cool to see that kind of like getting this kind of mainstream appeal, which is a big reason why we wanted to start our podcast. Yeah, get more eyes on these really good IPs.
No, that's actually really kind of sums up why you guys are doing what you're doing, and obviously you said you get to talk about the things you like, which is never too difficult. We sort of touched on it before about what we kind of felt we should have been into as kids, as guys. Tavi, in terms of the music, so I suppose the segue is, there just weren't a lot of Asian people who were into metal.
Yeah,
I think that's probably a fair conclusion.
yeah.
What's your take on it all?
I was excited to talk about this because we mentioned it in our podcast. But yeah, it's just I don't know how it's weird because like I mean just kind of analyzing it because us as Asians, we're quite reserved and we're taught not to like really overtly or explicitly express strong emotions. So, metal sounds like anger to a lot of people that don't listen to metal. And it's kind of like maybe that Western mentality of like express yourself, like really express yourself. So it's kind of like, I guess that's why it's seen as a Western thing. But I feel like if people in Asia openly listen to metal, like man, like depression rates would go down because metal is such like a calming aspect of my life. Like there's just if you um are really angry at something, you're not gonna listen to like calming music. I mean, like when I called Jetstar the other day because they cancelled my flight, they're like, "Can we put you on hold?" And they were playing like this minstrel flute music that was like trying to calm you down. It's like, yes. And it just made me more angry. So I imagine if they just played metal, because I understand, like they know that we're pissed off. Obviously, they're probably not going to do that, but like it's just something that's really relaxing about it. But it's just seen as a very like Western thing, and because I went to a predominantly Western high school, and I think that's the most, I guess, banana aspect of me is like alternative rock and metal. Is because the people I grew up with predominantly listen to that kind of stuff, and you kind of want to fit in, but then I do genuinely like just really love that style of music. Um,
What What are some of your favorite bands
oh,
from that genre?
Yeah, so growing up in high school, I was really into Slipknot. I was into Muse, even though they're more alternative. Tool and Deftones is a band that I've loved from then and still now. Oh gosh, there's so many. In terms of newer metal, I like Architects. They're really cool. The Australian metal scene is great. I grew up listening to Dead Letter Circus. I listened to Thornhill quite recently. I was a big Carnival fan. So I'm a big like progressive metal guy. I like my 15-minute songs where I can just sit on a couch and space out and listen to like different time signatures and shit. Even though I'm not a musician and I don't have the terminology to explain that, I really like a lot of like complex stuff. Yeah, I'd be here too long to listen to list all the bands that I like. But in terms of Asian metal, like Crossfaith are cool, Baby Metal, Crystal Lake, and like all that shit. Yeah, good fucking stuff, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. So you can probably put punk rock into that genre too, where it's
Yeah.
as an Asian kid, you really just want to please the parents, get through, not cause too many problems traditionally anyway. And yeah, the metal was counter to all that kind of stood for. Um, Less kind of compliant, less, uh, yeah, basically the opposite of what your parents would want. And then what about for you, Dan? What sort of music did you listen to then?
So I was probably on the other side of the spectrum. Like I think like as Tavi mentioned, my high school did have more Asian people in it. So like I did kind of develop an Asian clique, and within that clique we listened to like that kind of, that dirty R&B sound of the 2000s
Jake
era.
Shout.
It's like, I mean, it was like Usher
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Nelly and that kind of stuff, like Neo, that sound, like the stuff that you would hear if you go Asian clubbing ever. Yeah.
Oh, Asian
um,
clubbing, man. Those
yeah,
are the days.
back
Fuck.
in the day. Yeah. So, but then, yeah, I did have like a couple of friends that were into heavy metal. Like Tavi was one of them, and I just never really got into it, to be honest. And I'm still not that into it these days. Like I'll tolerate it. But
We took Dad to a Slipknot concert, me and my mate. We went to Soundwave, and
it's very out of
I
my
don't know how
element.
we convinced you, Dan, but we were expecting Dan to be ragdolled and flipping through the air. We're like, I wonder where Dan is, and Dan was like, help me, guys. But you managed to survive.
I
You're still
did, and
here.
I had a good time. Yeah, I had a good time there. I mean,
That would have been an eye opener
yeah,
for sure.
it was pretty intense. But yeah, I mean, it was a fun time, and I do like it. It's just that it's not something that I would just put on, like, of my own accord.
See, I find get a lot of nostalgia from listening to songs off that time. So for me, it was like The Bullet for My Valentine's, Trivium's, Escape the Fate, probably the main big three that I listened to during that time. And then you throw in a lot of punk bands too, because I think it's very popular at the time. And yeah, I'm with you, Tavi. I think when you're feeling a certain feeling, whether it's anger or you're down or whatever it is, that kind of music can really lift you back up. So yeah, for anyone
Maybe
out
that's
there,
why I'm angry all the
Yeah.
time.
Actually, just a question to you, Ethan. Like, and this is not just aimed at, like, say, Asian men back in the day, but like metal is not metal and grunge were much more mainstream back then as it is compared to these days. Like, was there just a lot of like rage back then? Because like I mean, we talked about strict parenting and stuff, but like I had a pretty easy life, and like I don't know, like was there just kind of palpable rage in the early 2000s or late 90s that everyone's just really into metal? Like it's kind of weird. Like yeah.
I think it was just cool to be angry.
Mm,
And you're
yeah.
like, you look back, you're like, what are you angry about? I was angry about being angry.
Yeah, yeah.
That's like that sort of thing.
I hate school.
Yeah, why? Yeah, I think if you look at some of the movies, like the music at the time, the music videos as well, I think had a massive part to play.
Mm,
And yeah, everyone you're 100% right. Everyone was just a bit more angry in the sort of earlier 2000s to mid
mm,
2000s. But yeah, no, it's interesting to I guess talk about that, and then on the music thing. So that's one side of sort of things that we thought that we should be doing as younger Asian men. For you guys, then, in terms of attraction,
Mm.
you guys obviously really into your movies. Did you notice race when you watched movies? You're like, oh, she's a nice Asian woman, or you didn't really care. It was just whatever's there.
Oh, growing up, Jamie Chung, man, fuck, you know her? We were just like,
Yeah,
damn,
yeah, yeah.
Jamie Chung. Um, I didn't, not really, to be honest. No, like I mean, if I'm going to talk about my teenage crushes, it was like Jennifer Lopez. Then it was Jessica Alba. If you remember the early thousands, Jessica Alba was the shit. Um, yeah, I no, I honestly like these days I would say like I am more attracted to Asians now, but like yeah, back then I didn't really have that much of a preference.
Maybe it was
Yeah.
lack of options though,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
there
I
weren't
mean
that many Asian women on
it only
TV
real
back
like
then.
actually I think actually to bring up a point, I didn't think Asian women were that attractive back then until I really started getting into
Are you
K-pop.
saying that Lucy Liu is not attractive, Tavi?
I back then, yeah, I didn't. I like, yeah.
Because she was
Actually,
the only one,
watching
right?
Charlie's Angels, I was like, Lucy Liu was the less attractive one
Okay.
because you kind of get conditioned in, and you can't really help that because we grew up in a predominantly white society with a lot of Caucasian media. Like, you can't help but kind of I guess, for lack of a better term, discriminate against like what you like or you get. That's just how it programs your mind. So maybe even like going back to the conversation about Asian role models for men, like sometimes we'd see the Asian guy and we just think weak, like instantly back then. But now it's kind of like um, I do think about it a lot more now than I did back then. I just kind of just took it for whatever it was. Like race didn't matter to me, like she's hot or not. Maybe yeah, maybe back then I preferred like I guess yeah, white women more than Asians. Yeah. I never really thought about that until now, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even like outside of movies, in real life, remembering back in the day, like all of my first crushes were not Asian, I think, from memory anyway. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was really a factor in terms of physical attraction. Yeah, yeah. Oddly enough.
Yeah. That's true. All my first crushes were yeah, white. Yeah.
Hmm.
Like you guys say, and then as well, even with like personally, not say not me personally, but not celebrity crushes, but people you actually might know. You just take what you can get really at that age. Yes, you can't be too picky. Yeah. Well, let's talk about what I really wanted to talk about then. So, you guys moving to Japan. So, what was the catalyst for doing that? How long did you go for? I guess we can take them one at a time. So, why did you guys want to go there?
So, I guess the first time I went to Japan was just for a holiday. I spent like 7 days in Tokyo, and it was maybe my second time overseas as an adult, and it just blew my mind just landing in Tokyo and just seeing Shinjuku at night for the first time. You were with me, right?
Yeah, we went to
Yeah.
Japan for the first
That's
time
right, yeah.
together.
And it's just like it was so different to anything that we'd seen before. Just the energy of that such a city at nighttime, like because we arrived quite late in the evening as well, possibly like 11 p.m. or midnight, and just everything was still open. There was so many people around still. Like music was playing in the streets, that kind of like high intensity anime style music. Yeah, and you're like walking past all these neon signs, and it was just really like mind blowing. And then I remember like vividly um, spending ages trying to find our hotel because we lost the address or something stupid. And then we went through like this whole fiasco of like we couldn't get internet at the time, so we went to like a net cafe. But the net cafe, you had to sign up for a membership to use it. So I was like using really broken Japanese to try and get this membership. But then we eventually found the hotel, dropped our bags off. It was like 2 a.m. by that time, and then me and my friend were hungry, so we just started walking the streets trying to find somewhere to eat. And we ended up finding like this little like restaurant that was just had one old guy in it, and it looked like his house, but there was a menu out the front. So we walked in, and he like was like, "Yeah, come on, come have a seat." And we didn't order anything. He just put like a hamburger steak and a fried egg on there, and it was so weird. It was such a bizarre feeling, like eating in this guy's living room basically, but it's a restaurant, and coming like off these kind of neon glowing streets, like the kind of Tokyo that you imagine, but then there's also kind of like this homely, cozy aspect to it if you just walk down like an alley. Yeah. So I think that's what kind of sold me on Japan initially, was like I just knew there was so much to see in not just Tokyo but in Japan as a whole. So yeah, eventually.
And then from there, how long was it before you're like, I think I want to actually live here for a bit?
Probably like I moved there 2 years after that initial trip, I think. And it was because of like work situations. Like, I was actually made redundant, and then it took me, I spent a long time looking for a job, and I felt like so like down at that point. And I just felt like I needed a fresh start. And I had talked to people in the past that had taught English there, and like I'd be drunk at karaoke, like going, "Man, I wish I could do what you're doing, man. I wish I could go to Japan and teach English for you. That would be mad." And then I remember, like even in my drunk state, I remember the guy turning to me and saying, "There's no reason you can't do that. Like you have everything you need to go to Japan if you want to." And then I think that really stuck with me. So when I was at that low point, I was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna go to Japan." And then yeah, I ended up staying there for like 8 years.
See, Japanese must be pretty good then.
Yeah, Dan.
You would
how
think
awesome
it
is
would be.
Japanese, yeah?
Honestly,
After 8 years? It's because you were socializing with all the
yeah,
white
that's
people.
probably yeah. It's because in the industry we were in as well, teaching English, they encouraged no use of Japanese in classes. So like, yeah, you could only really learn Japanese if you really put the time in to go to lessons and to actually like go out and meet Japanese people, right? And because we were all English teachers, like when we went out with our coworkers, we'd just be speaking English. So yeah, I mean, it is embarrassingly bad Japanese for living there for 8 years. But like yeah, like I managed to convince Tavi to come as well.
Yeah.
Because you were in between jobs at that point,
Yeah,
right?
I was made redundant too, so I was like pretty down. But I mean, like, for my experience, like, yeah, you see Japan through the lens of anime and films, but then going there, it's just a new energy, and I just have like memories of going down Golden Guy and like just really hospitable like bar owners in these really tiny bars, and then drinking way too much shochu and me like throwing up sardines in a toilet. I still remember that. And yeah, and then but like I just loved like the energy and like I think it was the first one of the first times I'd been around so many like Asians who were kind of like me, because I was a very introverted kid in high school. Like I was really, really shy. So, and that kind of cost me like not cost me jobs, but like it made it harder for me to work because I just didn't know how to interact with people very well. So I was very like reserved. But then when we were in Japan, it's kind of like it's like if you are not kind of trying to talk or help yourself out, like you're screwed. So you just do the best you can. And it kind of made me come out of my shell a bit more. And I think you can just feel that energy. So when I came back to Japan, like a much more confident person, but then when I lived there, it went the other way. But it's yeah, I kind of feel like a really strong connection to a lot of the people there. I think one of my most fondest memories is it was me, Dan, and a few other friends, and we went to this one bar, and there was this really cute bartender behind just serving us drinks, and we were literally she didn't speak very much English at all, and we had one friend who spoke broke all right Japanese, and it was your broken Japanese, but there was just kind of like connection between everyone there. Whether it was genuine or not, I'm not sure. We were all pretty drunk, but yeah, we just sat there the whole night. We watched like
Bruce
both
Lee.
Kill Bill
Yeah.
movies, and then we watched like
Game of
Bruce
Death, I think.
Game of Death,
Yeah.
and we were just chatting, and then the Japanese regular locals would come in, and they would just like talk to us, and it was really like a really nice experience. Yeah, I threw up at like 6 a.m. and I was really cold because it was like winter or something.
It's such a trusting environment though, you know?
Yeah,
Like I remember that there was a point in that night where we wanted to eat pizza or something, and then
oh
she
yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"You
yeah.
guys wait here. I'm gonna go to a
No,
convenience
yeah,
store
me,
and get a
me and
pizza."
me and our other mate, we're like, let's go, like to the convenience store and buy ingredients together, and then you can make a pizza for us. So like, yeah, we literally bought like a pizza base with her and sauce, cheese, and ham, and she cooked it for
She
us.
left me and our other friend in the bar
Yeah,
unattended.
yeah, she left you guys. Yeah, you guys went behind the
I did
bar,
go
didn't
behind the
you?
bar, and we were taking pictures of just me pouring drinks. But yeah, I mean that's in Tokyo as well. So it's such a like, it's weird how trusting they are.
Yeah, and then when you come back to Australia and you realize how barricaded everything is because we can't have nice things here without people chucking them into rivers.
Yeah, pretty much. So did you guys have like a cultural sense of belonging when you were there? Because not so much because it's Japan, but and also not just because it's an Asian country, but more so those are the kind of those values of everyone kind of being so helpful and things like that.
I think, yeah, I think definitely, yeah. Like, I think that was one of the big reasons. Like, outside of being an Asian country, it was a lot of the Asian sentiments and just the I guess the aura that you feel just being
I
there.
think
Like everyone's quite reserved, and
Japan really suits introverts, I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
in general. And I noticed this like working with the English teachers that we did work with, like everybody had a fairly similar vibe. Like everybody was led to Japan for some reason, and I think it's got a lot to do with like personalities. There's just something about Japan that draws in this kind of more introverted type of
it's funny because
character.
I was like the most extroverted probably out of all these people
Yeah.
someone who used to be so introverted in high school, and then I was the one that was organizing all the parties and maybe getting into a little bit of trouble. The people talking behind my back, but that's all right. You know, that's the price you pay for being extroverted in Japan.
But like you said, it did bring you out of your shell as
Yeah,
well. So you did go
definitely.
to back to Australia a more confident person. And now we have a fucking podcast where we just talk shit
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we don't
that's it.
really, like it's not really an introverted person thing to do. So yeah, I think it's like um, we definitely found a connection not just with like the natives there, but also with the expats that did
Yeah.
live there and did move there as well. And we still, connect with them to this day. So yeah,
Yeah, well, sounds like a really fulfilling experience. I mean, 8 years as well. That's a long time. You really get to
I didn't
sort of
stay
set
there
yourself
that long.
up.
I only stayed there for 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have died. I was not a very responsible person.
There's only so long you can go puking into toilets.
Puking on yeah. I spent the majority of my budget on alcohol, and when it was running out, I would sacrifice my normal meals to just eating potatoes for dinner,
I,
just
I
to
was
survive.
lucky
Yeah.
enough to meet my partner in Japan, and
Yeah.
she kind of mellowed me out a bit. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have made it either. To be honest. But yeah, it's definitely a good
And
time.
then coming back to Australia, how was that kind of reset? So probably more for you, Dan, because you did 8 years. Tavy doing his 2 years. Getting back to, I suppose, living in a Western country, things aren't as readily accessible. All those things. Did it take a bit of getting used to get
Then
to?
I came back at odd times. Because I came back, I had like major reverse culture shock, and like I was in a bit of a crisis. Like I'm like, what the hell am I gonna do with my life? Because like back, I decided to study film because I'd always wanted to do it, but like back then, I'm like, oh fuck, what am I supposed to do? Um, but like long story short, I kind of rebounded myself, but. It's a lot. It's an interesting story when you talk to expats, not specifically who moved to Japan, but like I had a mate who spent 5 years in Spain, I think, and he moved back, and there's just this like this blues that you get when you come back, and then like everything's the same but just a little bit different, and you kind of feel like I felt like I hadn't progressed in life. I thought I did, but then I was just like, you haven't actually. And I was just like, yeah, I was a little bit depressed when I came back. I was just like, oh, gee, this is it. This is 2 years of my life. And I'm just back in my old bed with a SNSD Jessica poster just on the wall. But Dan, you came back during COVID.
I did, yeah. I came back in 2019. Yeah, yeah. So like peak COVID. I remember the day that we decided to come back to Australia was the same day that the Japanese Prime Minister declared a state of emergency in Japan. So we were like, oh, we better go back to Australia, otherwise I don't know when we're gonna be able to go back. Um, and so yeah, we just packed all our shit, and then just pretty much left the next day. And then there was this period where it was just weird because like we had to do that 2 week hotel quarantine when we came back, and it felt like very surreal because it was just us two in a hotel room, just me having a great time, but my partner just not enjoying it because it's just me stinking up the place basically. But yeah, I guess like when we eventually assimilated into Australian life again. Yeah, I think it's the same as you, Tavi. Like I did feel the blues a bit. Just everything that was different to Japan annoyed me. Like, yeah, it'd be midnight and I get the munchies and I'm like, I can't fucking get food. Why isn't anything open? Yeah. And
It's Macca's or
yeah,
Macca's.
yeah, it's just have to go to Macca's. So yeah, I think that took a while to kind of just get used to again. Um, and I think it was more like that we had moved so quickly that we hadn't had any time to really organize anything. So we didn't have a place to stay. So we were staying with relatives. And like when you're used to having your own space, and then you have to live with people due to circumstances. It is hard. So it's a difficult. And then there's also the job hunt. So we were obviously looking for work while being in this situation. So I think maybe initially we were a bit too busy to kind of feel the blues, but not busy enough to not get angry. I think on my part anyway. Yeah, but eventually, once we kind of got our own space and we got back onto our feet, there's a lot to like about Australia as well. And I do remember, like, I just remembered like things that it's actually convenient living in Australia. But yeah, I think it's like Tavi said, it's a weird feeling of so much time has passed, but not that much has changed. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that irked me about coming back to Australia is like, why hasn't this place changed? You know, like because it hasn't changed, I feel like I haven't changed, and that feels bad.
It's funny you mentioned the things that make you angry. The service. I remember the first restaurant I went to back in Australia, the waiter was like, "What do you want?" And I'm just like, "Oh, this is Australia." It's just like very kind of rude. I'm not saying there's a lot of like really lovely waiters and waitresses in Australia, but that was a
The first impression
yeah, the
back,
first
yeah.
impression. And I remember catching a train in Australia and going the wrong way because I'd forgotten the lines. And then it was like late, and I was just like, "Oh shit! Now I'm gonna fucking get an Uber back or whatever." Yeah, that was a big deal.
So kind of tying it all back together then. Now that you guys are back in Australia, have you guys felt any discrimination? Not obviously post when you've come back, but just in general. Do you guys feel much discrimination from a racial aspect at all? At all?
I've actually felt less. I felt it a lot more in my early 20s when I was working. I was working at a Thai restaurant and I would clean tables outside. A lot of people would just drive by and yell obscenities at me, like "Go home." I've been egged once, and you just feel it. It's weird, and it happened. Obviously, there was a rise during COVID, and a lot of my friends told me stories of like people calling them like COVID girl on trains or whatever, and just like that. But to be honest, I haven't really felt it that much. I mean, someone swore at me the other day, but I don't think that was being racial. I think it's because they were on drugs. But I haven't really felt it so much now. I feel like because of this day and age, it's definitely like there's much more awareness of Asians around. So I don't really feel like I'm being discriminated against. But I'm also a big Asian guy, and maybe I look scary as well. So who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like I feel like for me, I stick to the city. I stick to places that I know. Like I work in Chatswood, which is a very Asian like part of Sydney, and I live in the city, which
It's
like
very Asian.
CBD, and there's like loads of Asians here. So yeah, I haven't really um, yeah, felt discriminated against at any point since returning. Like even peak COVID, I was kind of just keeping to myself, really, I think. But you do see stuff on the news, which is unfortunate, and you do hear stories from other friends. But luckily for me, I think I haven't experienced anything firsthand.
Yeah, it's definitely mellowed out. Like I haven't been egged in a few years, which is good.
Yeah,
So
I'm
yeah,
not
that's
sure if it's
fine.
just a matter of like back when back in our 20s, maybe we got around to more areas, maybe we were just exposed to more people, whereas these days we kind of just do keep to ourselves a bit more. Yeah, so that might be a factor, but yeah, I don't know. Like we went to a K-pop concert yesterday and there's no abuse held. Everybody was really well behaved, I thought.
Yeah. No fights were started, not
Yeah.
this time around, not like 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. The main one is probably people are just a lot more tolerant. I was talking to other friends who have they're Asian, so they're Asian kids, and we're saying like, are we concerned about that when they go to school? Because I guess most of us, well, Dan, you kind of went to a predominantly Asian school, but yourself and me, Tavi, a more Western or white school. And we're like, not really, not too worried because pretty much they're just going to be the majority in everything that we do moving forwards. There's just so many Asian people, and it's kind of cool, as we spoke about at the start. It's kind of cool to be Asian in this day and age. So I think, our kids are going to definitely have a better time of it.
Yeah, lucky them. They're not gonna get bullied. Like, yeah, primary school was a pretty rough time for me. Just like, yeah, I won't go into it too much, but it was not a great period of my life, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, like, if you could share like just a little bit of it, we don't have to go into too much details, but like, what sort of things was it?
Just really like, yeah, I caught racism massively in primary school, and it's probably like, if I really think about it, it's probably like the trauma of my introvertedness, like, or the cause of. Because I was just basically called the Chinese kid, and I do remember specifically a person who I'll never forgive, but that's okay. It's good to hold grudges. But just yeah, like I remember they would just bully me all the time, and I remember maybe for like I had like some close friends, but they would kind of just go off and play with other kids. But I remember like maybe 2 3 years of my life during lunchtime, I'd just walk around the yard just on my own, just because I didn't have any friends, just because I was different. I was like, yeah, just kind of seen as a weirdo, like yeah, like the Chinese kid. And I talk to my parents, and it's like you want them to do something, but there's nothing that they can really do about it. So it's like you kind of just have to uh, learn to deal with it. Um, but I think that has made me a bit like I'm not going to condone getting bullied because it sucks, but it um I have a much thicker skin these days. Like if people call me an idiot or whatever, it just like I just brush it off. Or if people, talk behind my back or say things like if I know someone's saying shit about me behind my back, I like, yeah, I don't really care that much because I've just been used to it from back then. So it sucks, but that's just the cards that I was dealt with back then. And it's just like you got to turn it into a winning hand somehow. So I guess, yeah, it was not a good period of my life, but there was an odd shift where suddenly everyone loved me later in primary school, which is weird, and everyone was being like overly protective of me. So it actually did really switch, and I found that weird as well. It's like, do you just like me now because I'm Asian? So that was a weird thing. But like the early years of my primary school was quite rough, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't relate to that sort of bullying. Obviously, there's comments and things with kids because they just don't know any better. But yeah, man, that sucks to hear that. And I guess you said sort of coping mechanism was to kind of go into your shell a little bit and not draw too much attention.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
it's
sucks.
fine now. That was over 30 years ago. I don't think that's going to happen in a high school these days, which is good. Like yeah, yeah. Like I'd rather not have someone have that same experience. But I mean, like if you think about it, like at least I'm not in war or anything like that. So that's kind of my coping mechanism.
It could be worse
It could be
mentality.
worse. Yeah, my mentality is like, if something bad happens, it's like, well, at least I'm not about to die. So sometimes it kind of affects my motivation to do something.
At
It's like,
least I'm
oh,
not Lee Byung Hun
yeah,
on
I
this
need,
thing.
I need to like, to motivate me. It's literally someone has to be pointing a gun to my head and like, do it now. Like, all right, I'll do it now. But otherwise, I'm like pretty chill on things. Yeah.
Well, it all makes sense now, right? You different things, ways that you were impacted when you're younger forms those habits when you're older. But yeah, man, thanks for sharing
Oh
that.
no, that's all good, man.
What I want to do is a quick rapid fire before I wrap it up. Try to don't think too much about the answers. Try to just first thing that comes to mind, and if there's some more context to give, we shall give that. So each of you, who's your biggest role models?
My dad.
Yeah. Well, that's a big question. I mean, I'm probably thinking of like film directors, probably like Charlie Kaufman. Yeah, I'm a really can I
Notoriously
say
mean film director,
can
Charlie
does it have to
Kaufman.
be someone I know? Like
No, it doesn't.
yeah. That's odd. He's not he's a white director, but he's really. I think for me, and in terms of my work, I really like look a lot at his stuff, and he really. I listen to a lot of his speeches, and I'm a big fan of his films. So that's really influenced me. Yeah, I'm just gonna be different and say a white guy. Yeah, Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah, I think my dad, in terms of personality, I think just his approach to problems is very kind of level-headed and very objective, potentially to a annoying level, which I have in yeah, maybe he's that guy that just wants to reason things out, even if you don't necessarily want to reason things out. And I feel like I've taken that into my personality as well, to the annoyance of people around me. But I do appreciate his kind of like vibe. I think like he doesn't really let things kind of get the best of him. He's obviously like both him and my mum have overcome a lot of adversity to give my brother and I this life that we have now. So yeah, I just he really both of them really, but they inspire me to kind of like be better, I think. Yeah.
Yep.
Dan had the better answer than
Sounds
me.
good. Good role model.
I'm just the cinema snob who just I sound like a dickhead now, I guess. It's like, oh, yeah. Can I change my answer? No, I'm just kidding.
You do you, man.
What does a meaningful life look like for either of you?
Making a Marvel Cinematic Universe film. No, honestly, I honestly at the end I want to keep working. I want to keep because I'm predominant like I kind of just do like as an indie filmmaker. I kind of take whatever job I can get, like whether it's editing or videography. But like my my ideal life at the end is having a family, a couple of kids, and me just being able to keep writing and directing films. Like I love telling stories. I love the art of cinema. I love talking about film. It's probably one of the only things I really know how to talk about a lot. And then you start talking about like stonks or whatever. I'm just like, nah, I'm lost, bro. But like other than that, yeah, I think to me that's like a meaningful life. Yeah, it's just to keep telling stories, particularly Asian stories. Like I really, that's my passion. I think. Yeah.
I think so. I think I would agree. Yeah. No, you're right. Like I think yeah, on a professional level, like you do want to kind of be responsible for something that's memorable to other people and something that has influence on other people, to like a positive influence on other people. And I think that's what I would want in my personal life as well. I just want to be able to influence people positively and have a good effect on the people around me. Like we were talking about Paddington Bear, like in a recent episode of ours. Are you familiar with Paddington Bear, Ethan?
Yeah. I saw that reel. Yeah.
He's just the best.
My brother who lives in London, he brought the Paddington Bear back for my son.
Oh,
that's
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And he's like, maybe he's my biggest role model actually now that I think about
Paddington Bear. Sorry,
like,
sorry, Dan.
sorry, Dan. Paddington Bear might be a bit above you. But yeah, no, he's just like the best dude, the best bloke. And he has such a positive influence without necessarily like being a lifesaver or anything. He just, something as simple as trying to see the good in people and preaching, not even preaching, just practicing good manners and kindness, I think is like can make a positive impact. I hope.
Well, on that then, what's your dream job?
Teacher.
And then to kind of premise that without any factor of money, so you've got all the money you need, and this is just your dream job.
Yeah, teacher/writer, I think.
I mean, because I'm kind of already living my dream job, but without the money. But to give you an alternative answer, I guess if I was to be resurrected in a new life and I did have unlimited money, I would want to be a musician because I really love music, but I'm just really noob at music. So yeah, that would be
Never
the
too late
next
to
life.
start.
Yeah.
Say that, but it's hard to pick up instruments.
Yeah, I have too many hobbies, so it's kind of hard, and I've kind of just given up on that. I'm like, I'll be fine. I'm Buddhist. I'll just die and be a musician in the next life.
Manifest it.
How would others describe you? 3 words each.
Patient. Annoying. And calm, I think.
Is patient and calm the same thing?
Yeah, they're pretty closely
Yeah,
related.
I definitely I think I would use patient, uh, chill. Is that the same thing?
That's calm, Thavy.
Okay, that's the same. Okay, let's say chill, patient, snob.
Chill, patient, snob.
When it comes to film, yeah, I don't
He'll
like. Yeah.
patiently listen to your opinion before telling you it's wrong. In the most chill way possible.
It's how you think others would describe you, so probably should have got you to describe each other, but anyway, that's done. What's one thing you'd change about yourself? Doesn't have to be physically, doesn't have to be, well, basically just doesn't have to be physically. Just one thing that you wish you could change about yourself.
Wish I was smarter.
I think you're already. I think that's the smart man's curse, is that you wish you were smarter, isn't it? Like is that the Dunning Kruger effect, right? Because like if you isn't the saying like if you are smart, you're constantly looking for answers for things, and then you realize how much you don't know. Isn't that like the ever reaching quest of men and women? It's just like the further you reach into the darkness, you realize there's more darkness. Sorry, is that a bit dark?
I wish you weren't so dark, Thavy. That's what I would. I wish for your business.
Maybe that's what I would. That's I mean, I like my darkness, my dark personality. Maybe I should change that. But I probably wish I was more decisive. I tend to be quite meticulous, and I mean, even setting up today, I'm always just like, oh, this looks wrong or that looks wrong. Um, and it definitely happens when I'm writing something. It's just like, I'll write it. I'm like, well, what should I do? And then I don't know what to do. And then I start questioning things like, well, this is like crap. And then I end up just drinking alcohol.
It's a vicious cycle. Speaking of, what do you guys like to do to relax?
Watch movies.
Drink. Aside from drinking, that's too easy. I mean, I play a lot of like video games. I still love gaming, but that's not per se relaxing. It
I like
depends
to
on the
watch
game.
TV shows and movies that I've already seen. I find that really relaxing. Like there's comfort, like those comfort movies and comfort TV shows.
I mean, these days I really like spending time in my backyard reading books. Like I love reading. Ever since I started writing scripts, I'm like, yeah, I really like just reading in the garden. I hate gardening, but I like reading in the garden. Gardening frustrates me. Um, but yeah, that's kind of like when I'm at my most tranquil, and then like I don't feel much pressure. Like if I feel tired from reading, then I'll just fall asleep in the chair and just like it's quite chill. Yeah, it's pretty chill. Yeah.
And then the last one, because you guys are a movie podcast, your all-time favorite movie.
Oh, that's an easy one for me, but maybe you should go first then.
No, let me think. You go first.
Battle Royale is my favorite movie of all time. It's funny, it used to be Fight Club for the majority of my life until I think I did a paper on Battle Royale, and then I did like a real like research into it. I'm like, man, this is a really deep movie for a movie that's about a bunch of year niners killing each other on an island. Like, are you familiar with this movie at all, Ethan? Yeah, so it was a 2000s or 2001's movie, and it's about in an alternate history Japan, there was a law called the Battle Royale law, and they would pick a random junior high, which would be year nine in Australia, a class somewhere in Japan, and they would ship them off to this island that's occupied by Japanese military, and they would give all these kids any range of weapons, and they have to kill each other until there's only one left. It's intense. It's a really intense movie.
But also
So
funny in a weird way.
that's the rule in the story, or that actually happened?
No, that it didn't actually happen. It's not a true story, so it's just based off a novel.
It's like a dystopian
But,
future
yeah.
situation. It's basically the Hunger Games.
It's it's the Hunger Games, but much earlier and much better and much more intense. But yeah, it was one of those like video nasty films that was banned in a lot of countries because it's a quite a violent movie. Maybe not much by today's standards, because it's I like the dated aspect of it. It's very over the top. But like for me, it has action, it has drama, it's got emotion. There's a message. 'Cause I think the message is about like uh, when you are going through like the high school system or the uni system, you are kind of like competing over your friends, and you're basically like killing them in a sense. I think that was like the main theme of the movie. Like, how far would you go to get like the top grade? Um, and so, like for me, it's like that's like yeah. I think that's the pinnacle of film for me.
I had to think about it because mine always changes, but I'd probably have to say The Matrix is my favorite. It's just in terms, yeah, the first one. In terms of movies that I've rewatched a lot of, and movies that I can quote like just anytime, and it's like it encapsulates a lot of things that I like about cinema as well. Like there's martial arts in it.
It's Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves. It's got a really cool like sci-fi storyline as well, and there's like so many good Hugo Weaving monologues in it as well. So and it's just very quotable. Like, and it paved the way for this kind of like stylized action cinema, for better or worse as well. Like, because there's a lot of like post Matrix films that are trying to rip off the Matrix's style, but they're pretty terrible at
Even
the
the
same
Matrix
time.
itself.
Yeah, even the Matrix itself. So like, I feel like there was a period of time where every movie had to have like a slow-mo like bullet time sequence. But before that movie came out, like action movies were basically like a fight scene would just be like a punch and an edit and a cut and to another punch and like people getting thrown against walls and things. And it was just like not great stuff. But then like the Matrix came in and added this kind of like stylistic element to the action cinema of Hollywood anyway at the time. So and that led to a lot of really cool films. So yeah, I think probably The Matrix.
What about you, Ethan?
I love World War II movies, so I'll probably go with something like Fury.
Fury. Yeah, I love World War II movies, but why Fury specifically?
I like the cast. So my favorite movies are always ones when I've watched it, I'm like, yeah, it's good. And then I go back and then I listen to the filmmaking process, like how they ran a boot camp for these guys for like 3 months and they basically lived in the tank, things like that. But yeah, good cast, decent storyline, and a lot of killing, and yeah, World War II is
What an
cool.
interesting focus, right? Like the tank battalion. You don't really see many movies centered around that. Yeah, that group of people.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that part of history. I find it. I don't know too much about it, but I'm always like quite interested in like conflicts before the 50s. I think it's a pretty interesting period of time. Yeah.
Yeah, so I studied World War II at school, and that just got me hooked. So anything related to it, I'm right in. But that's pretty much it from me. Obviously, shouting out the Two Asian Blokes podcast. Please check it out if you've gotten this far in listening. Like I said at the start, great friends of the show, and I think we've been pretty supportive of each other so far, and may that continue. Is there anything you guys want to shout out before we wrap it up?
No, just thanks for having us on, man. I think this was really cool to do. Very calming because like Dan and I have done a lot of stuff today. And you'll probably notice one of my lights is now dead, so my face might look a bit darker on footage. But no, I really enjoyed being on the podcast, and thanks again for reaching out to us, man. I think this was really cool.
Yeah, thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk about ourselves as well. I feel like we don't really do that often.
Yeah,
And
like I said, we're pretty introverted, so like I don't often reveal very much about myself. Yeah, so I think
very therapeutic
yeah,
element to
yeah.
it. And yeah, if your listeners want to hear us talk to you about Dragon Ball Z as well, check out that episode because that was a lot of fun.
No, it was. I've actually dived even deeper with my wife and the different themes and different things about what we spoke about. There's actually quite a lot there to unpack.
You're just gonna be playing that episode on speaker with
Yeah.
while your wife's in the room. Just
This is what I said. This is what I told you.
these guys agree with me. Vegeta's the best.
Yeah. I told her about the how we were like, surely you can't get Chelsea in this quiz. and then I was out with some friends and we were talking. We're like, what the hell is Chelsea? And we're like, exactly.
What is a chow siu? Isn't that a roast pork? Yeah. But no, we'd love to have you come back on our podcast when, you know.
Yeah. Same with you guys. I
Yeah.
think I wanted to kind of talk more about like what you guys actually do, so a bit of a crossover, so like the media side of things. But yeah, definitely want to get to know a bit more about your families. I know, Dan, you mentioned you have a brother. Tavy, I didn't even ask if you have siblings or not.
I have one sister, yeah. But yeah.
We'll save it for part 2.
Save it for part 2. Part 2 of Two Asian Blokes and Growing Ups, yeah.
But no, thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it. And we'll check everything out.